Hi everyone. Good to see you on my channel today. Today I will tell you a wonderful story. It is full of love and kindness. I hope you enjoy it and I wish you an enjoyable viewing experience. Thank you.
Alexander was an adventurer by nature. He was always looking for adventures on his heel, and as a rule, he found it. At least, that was the case in the last years of his life. But now, when all his dreams had crumbled to dust, all he wanted was peace, to escape, to leave, to dissolve, and he had to do it in proud solitude. Alexander pressed the gas, sitting in his car, and every now and then a stingy tear ran down his cheek. Such a talented surgeon, his former father-in-law said to him reproachfully, and such a talentless entrepreneur. That's why you went into business, huh? Well, if you don't know how to do it, don't take it. The truth is that Alexander did not think so. In his mind, he really knew how to do everything and much better than others. He calculated everything up to the last minute, envisioned everything, took everything into account. He ordered a brand book, did the planning, auditing, and generally did everything to avoid mistakes, calculated the potential profit, laid out funds for unforeseen expenses, and it still burned so bad you could see the smoke billowing from New York City. The entire medical community was discussing a massive failure. His project with the beautiful name Clinic Zero didn't just fail to take off. It collapsed, and the vibrations of the fall traveled through the yellow press, corrupt telegram channels, public pages on social networks. Expensive equipment, medicines, huge advertising costs all went to waste. And most importantly, his honest name was completely devalued. Not only his business, but his family as well. Katenka had always been susceptible to public opinion, so she grabbed their daughter and hid in her father's mansion. Alexander was not even allowed on the threshold, and his former father-in-law spoke to him through the video intercom. "What have I done?" asked the surgeon, gesticulating vigorously. "It's not my fault that things didn't go according to plan. Or rather, it's not all my fault. Who else but you?" "Go away, or I'll call the police," my father-in-law said. "And you know I have good connections there." "Bankruptcy is not the end of the world," continued the surgeon. "I can do anything. My family will not starve." "Get out." The voice was adamant. "Get Catherine," Alexander demanded. "Let her tell me everything herself. Do you really think my daughter wants to talk to a washed-up man like you?" The man scoffed. "Go away and forget her. The lawyer will send you the divorce papers and you'll sign them." "What about the child?" Alexander asked. "Do you want to separate me and Casey?" But the intercom was silent, the interlocutor disconnected. From the other side of the massive fence sounded the footsteps of the guard, and the surgeon considered it best to leave. He was afraid not of the police, but of other people. After all, the father-in-law, like a master gangster, could account for every million except for the first. There were different rumors, but Alexander did not want to check them, or he didn't want to check them yet. Now all he had to do was run to find a quiet place where he could lick his wounds like a beaten dog. Good thing at least some of his possessions had been saved. Mercedes Vito, for instance. A great car, high seating position, smooth running, huge interior. It's what Alexander used to get out of Washington. He had to hide out and wait out the troubled times. Wait for the creditors to cool off so he could negotiate and settle the debt. Or maybe start a new case. "I didn't lose," Alexander said out loud. "No, you didn't. I bought experience. I just don't like to bargain, and I don't know how to bargain." The price of buying experience was very upsetting. His whole epic with the clinic generated a giant minus of $100,000. From his comrades he knew that in the 90s, for a much smaller amount could be taken out into the woods, tied to a tree or kept in the basement. Back then, proud investors did not forgive debts and tried their best to pay them back. Of course, the times in the US are not the same anymore. but they will definitely want to get at least part of that money from him, especially since all the contracts bear his signature. What Alexander could not understand to the end why he lost. Alas, to figure it out was not enough mental strength. As soon as the former general director plunged into the documents, he immediately struck despair. He bought the experience. Alexander continued talking to himself. Who should I sell it to now? It's not the most liquid commodity, if you look at it. Although, how many times did Henry Ford go bankrupt before he became a national legend? He did it, and I can do it. For some reason, he couldn't think of any similarly positive examples in domestic history. Bankrupts often ended up in the dock, where they were called crooks, or they simply disappeared, and no one wanted to search for them. Such an outcome, of course, could not be excluded, but I did not want to allow it. It was necessary to escape, to hide at least for a while. That's why he grasped yesterday's call the way one who falls into an abyss grasps for air. "Good afternoon," said the velvet voice on the other end of the line. "Allow me to introduce myself, Emmanuel Turk. And you must be Alexander. I was told you were looking for a job." "Hiya." Alexander was surprised. "Not that I'm looking, but I'm willing to consider suggestions. Do you need a family doctor? Or are you planning to open a chain of clinics? You were recommended as an extremely qualified surgeon." The voice continued. "We need just such a specialist for a very specific task." "What kind of work?" Alexander asked. "Here, you know, they say all sorts of things about me. We are not interested in biography and other people's words." Emmanuel cut him off. "We do not abandon our own people and do not give them to anyone. As you understand, I can't say anything over the phone." "But, Alexander, my time is worth a lot of money," the voice said ingratiatingly. "Instead of dropping everything and rushing to me, you ask meaningless questions." "You speak in riddles," said the surgeon. "I speak in riddles," corrected the man and laughed. "Do you know the village of Raznovidno? Come as soon as possible before another person takes your place." The surgeon began to realize where he had heard the name before. I think he had seen a big investigation that some millionaire had bought a huge plot of land in the neighborhood, restored an old manor house, and was now building a kind of commune there. He had a funny name, like the President of France. And now, having made a journey of 500 kilometers without a single break, Alexander was approaching the goal. A strange invitation, but dare he expect anything better? The lights of a village appeared in the distance. The navigator claimed that the destination was 15 minutes away. The first thing the millionaire must have done was to correct the road leading to the village, because the canvas was perfect. It was this that played the fatal role. At the very entrance to the village, near the sign with the name Raznovidno, the surgeon did not slow down. A shadow flashed. Suddenly, in the twilight, right in his path, he saw a silhouette. Definitely a woman. Long black hair, dark dress. He sharply pressed the brake and heard a bang. The horror made Alexander want to scream. By the age of 50, Emmanuel had reached unprecedented heights and sank into ennui. It's good to have something to strive for. First, you collect money for a new car, and in 5 years you start building a summer house or pay for your child's education. It's great when you climb smoothly, step by step, and you reach the last one already at a respectable age, when reaching the top coincides with the sunset of not only professional, but also biological life. In this sense, Emmanuel was unlucky. At 50, he realized that there was nowhere to go further. Having made huge capitals in banking, he profitably distributed them in a variety of directions. Whatever he took on, everything turned into silver, if not gold. He made a fortune in cryptocurrencies. Emmanuel believed in their potential when his colleagues laughed at digital. But success has a downside. A lot of knowledge increases sorrow, and a lot of achievements increase ennui. You get used to victories like to the strongest drug. And after the 50th anniversary, which Emmanuel celebrated with a big celebration in Tuscany, He was overcome by sadness. What's next? He thought every day. The millionaire had fulfilled every wish he could, not only his own, but also those of his wife, children, close relatives, and friends. The question of what to do next became more and more acute. Then he remembered the dilapidated farmstead he had seen in the village of Raznovidnoy 5 years ago. He had been brought there by his failed business partners, who wanted to build a factory near the dying village. That time Emmanuel felt that even his touch would not be enough to turn the cursed earth into gold, silver, or at least copper. Or was it that he was just being tricked? "We need a strategic investor," said one of the failed partners. "We see huge potential in this industry." Emmanuel got bored, went to the men's room and escaped. It was March, but the ground was still frost-bound. In his expensive Italian boots, he reached the abandoned manor house of someone's family nest, with columns, balustrades, and other architectural delights. Wandered through the dark rooms, trying to figure out what had been here before. I imagined dinner parties and parties, imagined the gathering of a huge family after the birth of a child or the death of a grandmother. He was transported back to the times of kings, nobility, and balls. He was brought out of his oblivion by the ringing, gaudy voice of a girl laughing. She was 14 years old, and she was sitting on a carved chair that had miraculously survived in one of the rooms. "What is your name?" he asked her. "Sophia," the girl replied and smiled. "Why do you come here?" "I see people calling my name," she explained, suddenly becoming serious. "It's so nice and quiet here." He didn't understand what came over him at that moment. Why he suddenly liked the girl until his heart ached. He approached her, took her by the shoulders, and then the fog set in. Nothing like that had ever happened to him before or since. He went back to the village and said a firm no to the guys who wanted access to his money. Walked around looking around for backstabbers. When he got back to Washington, he went to church for a long time, prayed, told the guards to keep an eye on the girl and help her family. And when he found out Sophia's mom and dad were impenetrable alcoholics, he took the kid in. But she had a peculiar temperament. She now and then ran away to return to her native village. "Sophia," he said to the girl when she was found again, "you're upsetting me." "I want to go home," she replied. "I'm an adult. I can go wherever I want." "You should have come with me to celebrate my 50th birthday," the millionaire said. "We had a wonderful time." "Your heart is empty," Sophia said sternly. "And I have a house, but you prevent me from going there. And all the time you want me to keep quiet." "Then we'll go back there together," Emmanuel said. I persuaded him. He arrived in Raznovidnoy and decided to linger. The village continued to keep his secrets, like a secret offshore reserve of money for a rainy day. Raznovidnoy had only one secret, but what a secret! He would have loved to erase it from his memory, but he couldn't. He bought and reconstructed the manor. 100 workers worked day and night. He built a beautiful and smooth road, as if for an exhibition. But it wasn't enough. How was Sophia? Emmanuel asked the head of the security service on duty. "No change," he replied. "Escape to her kennel." "We're on it, boss." Every time Emmanuel asked himself, had anyone found out his secret? And he hoped not, or his whole beautiful life, his wonderful picture, would fall apart. He made Sophia a luxurious room with its own bathroom, beautifully painted walls, and a 4-poster bed. But she kept running away to her parents' house, a dilapidated hut, and wouldn't even let her tidy it up. And the banker went about his favorite business of recruiting people. One could not hurry anywhere, because he did not set any deadlines for his project. A surgeon, Alexander is just one man among dozens of others. He needs doctors, not philosophers. He doesn't need advice or encouragement, and therein lies the greatest difficulty. He needs people who stand at the line themselves, lest they ferret out his secrets and make life even harder. The surgeon looked at himself in the rearview mirror. His face was white as paper. Who had he hit? After all, He had heard 1,000 times that at dusk, outside the city, you should be careful. That in small villages people don't realize the dangers of cars. How fast was he going? 60 kilometers at least. Slowly, as if wanting to delay the moment of meeting the inevitable, the doctor opened the door. He went out into the street. The fresh country air made him dizzy at once. He walked around the car, around no one and nothing. Only on the left fender is a small mark, not even a dent. Just a scratch. You can polish it. But the sound was very strong. "Good evening," a voice sounded behind him. Alexander flinched and turned around. Behind him, as if appearing out of nowhere, stood a girl. The wind fluttered her coal-black hair. Her arms were crossed on her chest, all wearing bracelets and other jewelry, crosses and symbols unknown to him. Around her neck was an amulet with a devil hanging from its tail. The girl was dressed in a black dress and heeled shoes, highly unusual for the countryside. "Hello." The surgeon's mouth is dry. "I hit someone. I heard a sound." "Nonsense," said the girl in black. "There was no one here but me." "Tell me honestly, did I hit you?" Alexander continued. "Just now. You may have a fever. Then you don't feel any pain. I'm a big specialist. I can examine you." "No," said the girl. "I only saw your car stop. I was sent to meet you. And there was no one else here. As for examining, I don't want to do that yet, but I won't rule out the possibility." "But I heard a thump," Alexander whispered in bewilderment. "A thud, as if something had been struck. That's the mark it left." "You are wrong," the girl said firmly. "Can we go? I'm cold. I've been here for an hour." "Where to?" the surgeon asked. "To your benefactor," she said with incomprehensible contempt, and suddenly looked up. Shadows flickered in the night sky, looking a little like small birds. "Stoats," she whispered. "They won't calm down. They sense an intruder." Alexander shrugged his shoulders. He liked the situation less and less. They got into the car and drove forward. On the way, the surgeon wanted to stop and examine the girl. Suddenly, she did not realize what had happened. The stranger resembled a witch from a popular TV series. Now the surgeon was tormented by doubts. Is she really like that, or is she also playing a role? While the girl showed the way, Alexander furtively looked at her hands. No scratches. If she had fallen, bruises and abrasions could not be avoided. The surgeon was sweating from the fear he had experienced, his shirt sticking to his body. They drove on, past the old houses and barns. "Call me Mr. M," the Turk asked. "I like it better that way. That's how all my business associates and friends address me." "What am I talking about? If those people could build buildings like that, maybe they were remarkable in their own way. There were no polyurethane moldings, no 3D printers to print patterns on columns. I want to revitalize the family nest. I'm still optimistic about the future." A girl entered the living room carrying a tray. When she turned her back and bent down to place a cup of green tea and a dish of chocolates in front of Alexander, a red figure became visible through her white shirt. It looked like a tattoo or a birthmark. "It's from Belgium," the millionaire explained, pointing to the chocolate. "My favorite. I believe that if you can't resist temptation, you should sin with flavor." "What is my role?" Alexander asked, coughing with embarrassment. Perhaps if it weren't for his delicate financial situation, he would have gotten back into his Mercedes and driven away from the mansion. A large community, like Raznovidnoy will soon be, needs its own dispensary. Mr. M shrugged. "I hear you're in distress. You've lost your job. My terms are you stay here, create a dispensary for the residents, get a tiny salary, and live happily ever after." "Actually, I am a doctor in demand," Alexander resented. "In Washington, I will be offered a substantial salary." "But you didn't listen," Mr. M stretched out. "A tiny salary into an account, and the rest in an envelope. In person from me." To hide his embarrassment, Alexander took a piece of Belgian candy in his hand and took a bite. He did not like sweets, but the taste of this treat caused a wave of emotions in him. Definitely, this millionaire knows how to live. "There is a question," said the surgeon, sipping from his mug. "Who will be treated in the outpatient clinic? You and your family." The millionaire laughed. In his eyes suddenly appeared a light, as if he wanted to tell Alexander something funny and disgusting at the same time. But he held back. Mr. Am was only able to calm down after taking a few sips of tea. "No, not at all," he said, laughing. "My family is in Austria. With my wife, you know, we've been together for 30 years, and relations have become somewhat cool. My eldest daughter is studying art in the UK. Promised to visit next summer, but she hasn't been to the US most of her life, and is probably a bit apprehensive about the trip. So only locals will be treated." "Tempting," said the surgeon. The idea of sitting out in the middle of nowhere doing odd jobs seemed great to him. "I suppose you assumed I wouldn't refuse." "I assumed," nodded the millionaire. "Since you've already agreed, I'll make one more condition. Promise not to jump up from the table and shout, okay?" Sophia dreamed of the night sky again. She was flying, flapping her wings, circling the city. This dream, the same dream, had haunted her for 10 years now. Ever since the day she'd met Emmanuel, the meeting had changed her whole life. 6 months later, she found herself in Washington, D.C., immersed in a completely different world she'd never imagined existed. Now, when Sophia was flying through the night sky in her dream, the events seemed simple and unambiguous. But then, 10 years ago, she could not calm down and roared and roared. What if someone found out what the millionaire had done to her? What if there were whispers and judgments in the street? There were lights downstairs, over every house, over every street. All these were secrets, and she, flying over the city, could peer into the windows and gather them. Sophia saw everything: treason, betrayal, theft, and jealousy. Everyone has a whole collection of secrets. At that moment, realizing how imperfect people are, how much worse each of them is than her, the girl felt better. In the village, she had been called a witch since she was a child, all because of her grandmother. She was a witch doctor. She read tarot cards, read spells. Mom did not pass neither appearance nor gift. But no one doubted her, Sophia. That's why so often she ran away from everyone and went to the manor, abandoned a century ago, badly damaged by time. It was there that she met her benefactor, tempter, and destroyer. Now the night was ending, it was time to descend. As the sun appeared in the east, the lights of the mysteries faded. She could no longer so easily look into a stranger's house and see something that would make her feel better. And the last conversation she had had with Turk had been a nuisance. He had argued with her again and insisted that she had to marry, that he was tired of helping and was completely exhausted, worrying about the girl. Sophia had a different opinion on the matter. The millionaire was the first to give up and started raising his voice and throwing objects off the table to vent his emotions. "You ungrateful hillbilly," shouted Emmanuel. "I gave you everything. How dare you hope for such a thing?" "No," the girl snapped at him. "You would leave me alone, do you hear? Leave me alone. I don't want Italy. I don't want Washington. It is true what they say about you, that you are a witch," the millionaire hissed. But then his voice suddenly changed and became pleading. "Will you ever forgive me, Sophia? I have apologized so many times." "Never," replied the girl. She opened her eyes, the dream was over. Sophia was back in her parents' house, dirty, shabby, but still alive. Both Mom and Dad hadn't waited for her to return. Maybe they hadn't even noticed that Turk had taken her back to Washington. The bright sun shone through the window, which she disliked so much, but the mood was still wonderful. She thought about what she would do to Emmanuel's new guest, visualizing in her head. And her ideas made a voluptuous smile appear on her pretty face. Last night seemed like a dream. Waking up on the small bed, Alexander was reconstructing the events in his memory. The burn hurt. It was necessary to find ointment to heal faster. He also had a feeling of farce. It was as if he was caught in a huge prank, and at the end the cameraman with a sharp-tongued presenter was sure to jump out. He was roused from his slumber by a phone call. It was the landlady. There's something feudal about renting an apartment. Once you rent a corner, you have a landlord who can react painfully to sudden departures, and to whom you pay a monthly rent just by living on his concrete land. Alexander, the voice on the phone belongs to Leslie, an elderly tenant from Washington. Alexander, I don't understand. Where are you? I left, answered the surgeon, yawning. I went on a business trip. On a long trip. For more than 3 years he rented from her an excellent apartment in a good neighborhood. The beginning of the lease coincided with the start of his adventurous clinic. An ordinary doctor, even the head of a department, could hardly afford a 3-bedroom with a view of old Washington. But the director of a private clinic could. But you promised to pay me back, said the landlady, her voice losing its affability. And I believed it. You've been playing me for 3 months. Don't you realize that I'm losing my money? It's like a kindergarten. I'll pay you back, Alexander promised. I'll pay you back. Let's fix the amount within a year. I'll pay it off. I swear. And for the utility company? The landlady asked. You claimed that you don't allow late payments. I came to the MFC and I felt sick. My blood pressure was high. Because of you I had to part with a considerable amount of money. I will call you back, deceived the surgeon, dropped the call, and put the phone number of his mistress already blacklisted. This part of the past needs to be dealt with decisively and irrevocably. What can she do? He would go to court, get a judgment, and spend years trying to enforce it. He has nothing to fear. His debt to the tenant was ridiculous against the background of his problems. What happened yesterday? First, he almost ran over a girl who looked like a witch. She came out of nowhere, and he could clearly hear the impact. But nothing, the witch was unharmed. Then Alexander drank tea in the company of a millionaire, who is in the top 10 of the American Forbes list. A little later, quite at night, he allowed Turk to brand himself on his back, just above the shoulder blade. Now the spot where he had been cauterized by his eccentric employer was sore, but he slept as soundly as a baby in his new position. I have my own rules, Mr. M explained, and accentuated that he does not deny choice. All my people have that seal. Consider it a little superstition if you like. It's how I believe I can help anyone who finds themselves in trouble. All right, Alexander replied, unbuttoning his shirt. Place your bets. The most curious thing was the fact that the millionaire personally heated the metal brand in the fireplace and cauterized the surgeon's skin himself. He did it quickly and accurately, one might even say professionally. And then he put a band-aid on the burns, all of which suggested that this was not the first time Mr. Am had performed the ritual. There was something intimate about the act that made Alexander feel a burning shame, but in his position such a whim seemed a small price to pay for the opportunity to hide and escape from the angry tenant. Tomorrow morning you will sign the papers, said the millionaire in parting. The lawyer will tell you how to protect the income from the claims of creditors. You talk about it so calmly, the surgeon shrugged. The burn site was aching. It would be a good idea to anesthetize it. I thought bankers hated insolvent debtors. Mr. M laughed again, as if Alexander had told a good joke. The millionaire looked at the surgeon warmly, as if he were teaching his son about fractions or wrong numbers. So you do not owe me, but my worst competitors, he explained. Not even you, but your enterprise. By the way, if you think of starting something like this from now on, hire a good operations director. Don't take this burden on yourself. I noticed a long time ago that doctors don't understand business processes very well. I don't think so, Alexander said. This experience has been enough for me for a lifetime. Never say never. We'll put you up here in the mansion for now. Helga will see you off, said the millionaire, yawning. I should be resting now. Otherwise, I won't be able to go jogging tomorrow morning. The girl who served him tea led him to a room at the back of the mansion. As she walked ahead, the surgeon was able to see the branding marks under her clothes. He suddenly wanted to take a closer look at the mark. Moreover, the girl looked good, and he was already hungry for female company. Alexander got a small room that looked like a servant's bedroom. "You can wash here." The girl nodded at the door. "The toilet is over there." "Where did the brunette go?" Alexander asked. "Sophia." The girl smiled. "I don't know. I guess she flew away on her broom again. A coven." "Do you live here?" "We're on shift," she said. "We work 2 weeks at a time. But you must be here all the time. Would you like to stay with me and show me what's what in this castle of yours?" The surgeon asked hopefully. He wanted very much to spend the evening in the company of this beauty, to forget himself. "No," the girl cut him off without further thought. "Good night." The job interviews were tiring, but the nature of Divergent was inspiring. In the morning, Mr. M jogged to the lake where he could swim. In the afternoon, it was time to cycle. And in the evening, he could work out in the gym with a personal trainer. It was best to keep a surgeon on hand, just in case you sprain a ligament or have another injury. If everything went according to plan, and there was no reason to doubt it, the outpatient clinic would be ready in 3 months. "Helga," Emmanuel said, turning to his assistant. "In the evening, a dinner party. Invite the surgeon too. Let him get used to it." "And the general?" Mr. M thought for a moment, and after a few seconds said, "Yes, invite him or he'll be offended. He's got a good family. Just tell him there'll be no alcohol. He'll bring his own," Helga said. The millionaire rubbed his chin. "He won't bring much with him. You realize I don't want to see him get drunk again. I don't know why we put up with him." Alexander spent the whole day in the library studying documents. The outpatient clinic was as well designed as his failed clinic. Unknown experts calculated the maximum workload, formed a staff schedule, and even a plan for the purchase of medicines. Studying the documents, the surgeon could only marvel at the high level and foresight of those who had prepared them. "Mr. Doctor," Alexander heard a familiar voice. "You're not going to dinner?" The surgeon looked up and saw the same girl who had met him in Razmovidmoy. She wore a short black sleeveless dress, and Alexander saw her tattoos. On the left forearm was drawn a horned monster in a jacket and tie, and on the right Baphomet in the image of a Japanese warrior with a samurai sword. Flashy makeup, neat manicure girl looked completely different from yesterday. "I don't know," replied the surgeon, trying to hide his interest. "What kind of dinner?" "The benefactor holds them every week, on Wednesdays," the girl explained. "He invited you too, but Helga is afraid to tell you. She said you made an indecent proposal to her last night. She's a decent girl." All blushed and drank valerian half the night. "God forbid," waved his hand surgeon, feeling like a blush. "Nothing like that happened. She must have misunderstood me. I'll have to apologize." "Oh, I want to apologize for last night, too," Sophia said. "I don't know what came over me." "What happened?" Alexander asked. "The evening was just like the evening. You left as soon as we crossed the threshold of the mansion. When you drove up, you hit a plastic post," she explained. "You know, the kind they put up to mark the curb. You thought it was me. I should have realized and said so right away. Instead, I just played the part of some note-taking fool. But I have an excuse. I waited an hour for you under a gloomy sky. It makes you see the world differently than it really is." "Oh, you mean that?" The surgeon stretched out. How did he not look at this girl yesterday? She was very beautiful, and her demonic image was frightening and attractive at the same time. "The main thing is that it's not you. I hope you can find a decent suit in your closet," the girl said, critically examining his shirt and jeans. "Maybe a shirt, too. And a tie. I'm sure you'd look great in a tie. I'll find one. But to tell you the truth, I'm not really ready to party tonight." "Oh, you're mistaken," Sophia smiled, and there was something sinister in her look again. "A soiree is not about fun, it's about vanity and trying to hide something shameful. Something I love about people. I'm sure you won't refuse me, so come on over. See you later, Mr. Doctor." The girl was both attractive and repulsive at the same time. Alexander folded the documents, sighed, and thought that if he had the same strong project, his clinic would not have failed. Okay, it had failed. He could not understand why the media had started such a travesty of his brainchild, as if he was the only one to blame for the fact that the implants could be of poor quality. Interviews were tiring, but the nature of Raznovidny inspired. In the mornings, Mr. M jogged to the lake where he could swim. In the afternoon, it was time to bike, and in the evening, he could work out in the gym with a personal trainer. It was best to keep a surgeon on hand, just in case you sprain a ligament or have another injury. If everything went according to plan, and there was no reason to doubt it, the outpatient clinic would be ready in 3 months. "Helga," Emmanuel said, turning to his assistant. "In the evening, a dinner party. Invite the surgeon too. Let him get used to it." "And the general?" Mr. M thought for a moment, and after a few seconds said, "Yes, invite him or he'll be offended. He's got a good family. Just tell him there'll be no alcohol. He'll bring his own," Helga said. The millionaire rubbed his chin. "He won't bring much with him. You realize I don't want to see him get drunk again. I don't know why we put up with him." Alexander spent the whole day in the library studying documents. The outpatient clinic was as well designed as his failed clinic. Unknown experts calculated the maximum workload, formed a staff schedule, and even a plan for the purchase of medicines. Studying the documents, the surgeon could only marvel at the high level and foresight of those who had prepared them. "Mr. Doctor," Alexander heard a familiar voice. "You're not going to dinner." The surgeon looked up and saw the same girl who had met him in Raznovidny. She wore a short black sleeveless dress, and Alexander saw her tattoos. On her left forearm was drawn a horned monster in a jacket and tie, and on her right Baphomet as a Japanese warrior with a samurai sword. Flashy makeup, neat manicure girl looked completely different from yesterday. "I don't know," replied the surgeon, trying to hide his interest. "What kind of dinner?" "The benefactor holds them every week, on Wednesdays," the girl explained. "He invited you too, but Helga is afraid to tell you. She said you made an indecent proposal to her last night. She's a decent girl." All blushed and drank valerian half the night. "God forbid," waved his hand surgeon, feeling like a blush. "Nothing like that happened. She must have misunderstood me. I'll have to apologize." "Oh, I want to apologize for last night, too," Sophia said. "I don't know what came over me." "What happened?" Alexander asked. "It was just a night out. You left as soon as we stepped through the mansion. When you drove up, you hit a plastic bollard," she explained. "You know, the kind they put up to mark the curb. You thought it was me. I should have realized and said so right away. Instead, I just played the part of some note-taking fool. But I have an excuse. I waited an hour for you under a gloomy sky. It makes you see the world differently than it really is." "Oh, you mean that?" The surgeon stretched out. How did he not look at this girl yesterday? She was very beautiful, and her demonic image was frightening and attractive at the same time. The main thing is that it's not you. "I hope you can find a decent suit in your closet," the girl said, critically examining his shirt and jeans. "Maybe a shirt, too. And a tie. I'm sure you'd look great in a tie. I'll find one. But to tell you the truth, I'm not really ready to party tonight." "Oh, you're mistaken," Sophia smiled, and there was something sinister in her look again. "A soiree is not about fun. It's about vanity and trying to hide something shameful. Something I love about people. I'm sure you won't refuse me, so come on over. See you later, Mr. Doctor." The girl was both attractive and repulsive at the same time. Alexander folded the documents, sighed, and thought that if he had the same strong project, his clinic would not have failed. Okay, it had failed. He could not understand why the media had started such a travesty of his brainchild, as if he was the only one to blame for the fact that the implants could be of poor quality. In the heart of the sizeless mansion was a fireplace room. The floor had been restored to its original appearance, alternating white and black tiles. It was amazing how this work had survived nearly a century of neglect. The ceiling was decorated with stucco in the Baroque style, fanciful patterns that were hard to take your eyes off of. As if mesmerized, the doctor looked up, admiring bouquets of flowers, fruits, leaves made of plaster. "Do you like it?" Mr. M asked. The surgeon immediately straightened up, as if embarrassed by his curiosity. "Oh, everyone has that reaction. No need to be embarrassed. I love art. You can spend hours looking at beauty, can't you? I love mascarons the most. You probably know they're plaster masks of people and animals. Look, they're all over the place. There's one that looks like me. Can you find it?" Alexander looked closely and saw dozens of images, above doors, above windows, in corners. On the masks were the faces of mythical creatures and animals, and on one surgeon was ready to swear he saw the features of Sophia's face. True, the millionaire was not found. The sculptor had hidden him in a secluded place. In the hall gathered about 24 guests. From invisible speakers played classical music to match the audience. "How beautiful," Alexander said. His mood had indeed improved. It was as if he was back in the time of kings, jewels, and poets. "Are you talking about Sophia?" smiled the millionaire. "I'm glad I liked her. A charming girl, by the way, a local. I took her into my family about 10 years ago. They say all sorts of things about her, like she's a witch, a sorceress. Don't believe it. She's a real beauty, just a little peculiar." The mood changed immediately, and Alexander felt a little uncomfortable. It was as if he had come into contact with some dirty secret that everyone wanted to forget. The owner of the manor went on, greeting the guests, and the surgeon was left alone. He beckoned to the waiter and took a glass of drink. Inside, he would have sworn it was champagne, but non-alcoholic, though at this point he wouldn't mind a little drink. "Be careful," Alexander heard a voice behind him and turned around sharply. Right behind him stood a man in a ceremonial military uniform. The surgeon had a poor understanding of epaulettes, but these were clearly generals. "Excuse me," Alexander asked. "Allow me to introduce myself," the military man said and straightened up. "Evan, retired military. I once commanded an entire district, but now I'm living out my days in retirement. Emmanuel Turk is our only comfort in this dump. We all pray to him like an icon." "Nice to meet you," Alexander replied. "My name is Alexander. I will work here as a surgeon. I arrived here last night." "A doctor?" The general became animated. "A doctor is very good. We need doctors. Maybe you can honor me with a visit." "No problem," shrugged the surgeon. "But you said I should be careful. What did you mean by that?" "Not what, but who," the general corrected him. "It's about Sophia. You should stay away from her. She is certainly a beautiful woman, but please forgive me for my liberty. Again, I apologize for such a crude comparison." "What do you mean?" Alexander asked in bewilderment. "What does it mean, fallen?" "That's what I mean," Ivan shrugged. "The girl is kind and sympathetic. She's not very good at relationships. She's had a lot of people fall into her net. And every one of them, has some devilish thing going on." "What nonsense!" Alexander was indignant. "I liked her. She has a soul and personality." "Exactly," said the general. "That's exactly what I said, fallen. I apologize. Do I dare expect our conversation to remain confidential?" "Of course." "Thank you. The honor is mine." He nodded, clicked his heels, and stepped aside. Sophia herself arrived much later, when the hot dishes were being served. The guests didn't exactly shy away from her, but avoided her. She walked right up to Alexander and took him under her arm. "I want coffee," the girl said with a smile. "What do you think?" "I think it's a little late for coffee," Alexander shrugged. "If only with milk and not strong." "It sounds delicious," Sophia replied and licked the corner of her lip. "I'll drink you down." "What?" I said. "I'll drink you down," the girl shrugged. The hallmark of the best staff is discreetness. You don't see the waiter until you need his services, and then he appears as if from nowhere. And now, as they approached the drinks table, a man in a white shirt appeared beside them. The obliging bartender made them 2 cups and set them on the table. That night, the witch behaved differently from the night before. She joked with him, discussed life in the capital and in the village, and asked him about his family. "How did you decide?" she wondered. "I don't know if I could have abandoned my child, but I did not," with heat exclaimed the surgeon. "I'm just not allowed to see her. It's just a matter of time. I will definitely get custody of her." Suddenly, her eyes were filled with demonic fire again, and her smile became intimidating. "There are easier ways to accomplish your goals. I could teach, if you are talented." As Alexander thought about what to say to this bold suggestion, Helga approached him. Sophia gave her a piercing look that sent shivers down her spine. Emmanuel's assistant whispered in her ear as if the girls were competing to see who could make the surgeon more anxious. "Mr. M is asking to come up." The host of the evening was literally blooming in glory. He wore a tailcoat, but of a very bold cut. His shirt was a democratic blue color, and his bounty was stylized under the flag of the European Union. When he saw the doctor, he smiled broadly. "Having a good time, aren't you? In the company of wonderful girls." "Not bad," agreed the doctor. "But you didn't tell me about these soirees. Are you nervous?" The millionaire was surprised. "You look a little pale." "I just haven't come to my senses yet. You remember that in my position it is better to keep out of the public eye." "Come on, old chap." Mr. M clapped him on the shoulder, made a gesture with his hand, and the music died down. "Dear friends," he said loudly, "let's welcome another member of our friendly team. This is Alexander, a talented surgeon. He has the most difficult task, which he will cope with, of course. We'll help him get rid of his fears and doubts, won't we?" There was a round of applause, and the doctor was really embarrassed by the attention. Some men came up to shake his hand, and the ladies gave him smiles. Suddenly he saw the old general who had suggested he beware of the witch walk out the door. And not alone. After 11 p.m. the guests began to disperse. Mr. M had disappeared, but his assistant was able to relax. She sat on a satin chair and ate her cake with a small spoon. She was nibbling a little bit at a time as if she wanted to stretch the pleasure. "Helga," said the surgeon, "I wanted to apologize for yesterday." "What was yesterday?" she wondered, wiping her lips with her handkerchief. "I'm sorry." "What was what?" "Well, I made an indecent proposal. I'm very ashamed, it's true." The girl wrinkled her forehead for a while. What a talented actress, thought the surgeon. Then her face seemed to brighten, and she laughed. "Ah, you offered yesterday to show me the estate," she remembered, and smiled slyly. "Oh God, I've never done that before. You ask again, and I will not refuse." "With pleasure," replied the surgeon, not understanding the hint. "But some other time. Listen, I'm glad we're on a first-name basis. I need to talk to Sophia." "Where's her room?" "I think she's busy right now," Helga hissed, and there was no trace of her sleek smile. She went back to the cake and broke off a large piece with a spoon. "I saw her going out in the company of that what's-his-name." "Evan?" Yes, nodded the assistant. "You won't find her here. She'll fly to her lair." "Where to where?" Alexander was surprised. "She's a local," Helga explained. "She was born here and raised here. Mr. M took her to Washington out of self-pity. And then he moved here. But that's just a story. He tells that story a lot, so bear with him. Anyway, this is her parents' house. It's a creepy den that's about to collapse. You don't want to go there and waste your time. Can I find her there? The surgeon didn't take the hint. Okay. The girl gave up and looked at Alexander with poorly concealed disappointment. Where is your phone? Here without a map will not understand. And one more thing. If you want to go aerial, there's a loophole in one place. Just don't tell him, okay? All absences and departures must be authorized by him. He's very particular about that. Alexander ran into his room and threw off his jacket. He needed to change and find Sophia urgently. The coffee had a different effect than he was used to. A terrible fatigue suddenly took over his body. He thought that if he lay down for a few minutes, it wouldn't be a big deal. He figured out roughly how to find the witch. Navigator to the rescue. After changing his clothes, he sat down on the bed and closed his eyes for a few minutes. After a while, refreshed and rested, the surgeon went on his way. Not wanting to meet the guards, he simply swung over the fence at the secret place Helga had told him about. The air was more invigorating than coffee. The June night was warm. Alexander wandered past the houses and thought about the fate of the villain. Yesterday, he was suffering in Washington, surrounded by a pack of angry creditors. Today, he was attending a dinner party. He quickly found the cabin Helga had told him about. He went to the window, peered in and saw a faint light. He knocked on the door and it opened. The whole hut consisted of a small corridor and a room. The windows were shuttered and the room was dark. The girl had changed her clothes, too. Now she really resembled a witch. She wore a burgundy dress, a low-cut hoodie, and her chest was adorned with a huge red stone on a chain. She had changed her hair, too, and now her black eyes looked at him from behind her bangs. Alexander looked at the girl and felt fear again, as if he were a rabbit on a rendezvous with a boa constrictor. "Hello again," Sophia said in a low voice. "I hate bright lights. I love strong coffee. Would you have some?" The surgeon nodded. The girl lit the scented candles, and also the flame under the flask. In it the girl brewed coffee, and when bubbles appeared on the liquid, she threw some herbs. He sat down on some kind of cushion right on the floor. He took the mug with the hot drink in his hands. It tasted unusual. "You're worried," the witch said. "You're nervous. What's wrong?" "I'm here, and my family's in Washington." The surgeon shrugged. "I miss my daughter very much, and my wife, of course." "Tell me," the witch demanded. "Tell me about her." "Well, we met at a club 10 years ago," began the surgeon. "Do you know what clubs are?" "Sure," nodded the girl. "A disgusting place where everyone pretends to be rich, beautiful, and successful, and then try to convince each other of their eternal love while standing over the toilet. How rude, but on the whole, yes." Kitenka looked down on me, Alexander continued. "I had just graduated from medical university. I had an internship. I remember I couldn't even buy her a daiquiri at that club. "Let's have a beer," I said. She agreed, so we became friends. Her last name didn't ring a bell. Stone. Stone and Stone. And then I found out what kind of girl she was, and believe it or not, I decided I had to have her. I made it happen. "What went wrong?" the witch asked haughtily, sipping her coffee. "You said it like you knew the answer," the surgeon muttered. Sophia laughed, and the sound sent shivers down Alexander's spine. "You fell in love not with a man, but with money," the witch said reproachfully. "You would have given up your own surname if one man had insisted, also for the money. But he didn't insist because, unlike you, he looks into the depths of things." "So, what?" said the surgeon, as if justifying himself. "Volkov is a good name. Besides, I was accepted into the family as a relative. No, I really loved Catherine. I really did. The money was just a nice bonus. Besides, it ran out quickly. I figured I'd earn just as much." The coffee made me dizzy. It was too strong after all. It seemed to him that while his body was sitting on the pillow, he was floating around this old hut, flying up to the ceiling and down. He wished he could go outside and soar into the sky. He hasn't felt so light in a long time. There's a way to get it all back, the witch said. If not everything, at least some of it. Come here. Apologize, the surgeon asked defiantly. I tried. My father-in-law wouldn't even let me in. You can ask for help, the girl said vaguely, looking at the flames in the fireplace. By the fire. Fire is my favorite element. Will it help? Alexander asked mockingly. Wouldn't it be better to call some spirits right away? You just don't believe, Sophia said, but you should. What do you want? How much? Alexander thought about it. To see Casey, of course. Take her to the movies. Take her for a walk. Do homework together. Breaking up with kids is hard, especially if you didn't believe on your own, but were kicked out. He looked hopefully at the witch. I know what I want, Alexander said. But don't tell me, Sophia demanded in that low, scary voice, but keep it in your head. She began to perform a strange ritual. She opened a glass bottle of water, poured it into an old, dirty jug, tossed in some powder, and there was a hissing sound. The room filled with steam or smoke. Alexander began to feel dizzy, and a nasty chill ran through his body. He suddenly wanted to run. The witch began to cast spells in an incomprehensible language. As the surgeon twitched, her hand was on his shoulder, heavy as a boulder. He couldn't even move as he watched the rituals. And then the witch sat on top of him, lifting his dress, and continued reciting her spells, similar to prayers or mantras, but now right in his face. Keep it in your head, she shouted in a terrible voice, and the surgeon's hair went up in a puff. The smoke cleared. He looked at Sophia, at her long black hair, her dark eyes, her shirt. While she was performing the ritual, the top button on her dress had come undone so tightly her lush breasts were exposed. He suddenly wanted to get this witch to possess her, to make her become only his. She noticed the look, put her heavy hand on the back of Alexander's head, pulled the surgeon to herself, and kissed him hotly. Together, they fell first onto the pillows, and then rolled onto the bare floor, merging together. And in a moment, when they became one, Alexander suddenly felt himself filled with power. He could defeat his father-in-law, his creditors, and even the naughty rock. Exhausted, he pulled Sophia away from him and smiled broadly. Only now he heard that his phone was ringing. Answer it, the witch commanded. The fog dissipated. The phone was indeed ringing on the windowsill, where he had placed it before resting for a couple minutes. It was already 9 in the morning. How time flies. It's only a dream, thought the surgeon, waking up in a sweat. He was lying in his room. The dense curtains blocked the light, so the sun did not wake him up. He had the strength to change his clothes, but not to go looking for the witch. He didn't even know if he liked the vision or not. But one sound that seeped out of the dream was a phone call. Alexander looked at the screen and could not believe his eyes. Catherine, his wife, already ex-wife. Was it really necessary to answer it? Yes, he said in a voice hoarse from sleep. Hi, hello, Catherine. Alexander, his voice was shaking. His ex-wife was crying. Alexandra, come to us soon. What's wrong? Daddy's not well. Suddenly, the connection was cut off. The phone went dead. I forgot to charge it last night. Alexander rushed to his bag, took out the wires and plugged in the phone. It took him a long time to come to his senses. Android didn't want to boot up. After 5 or 7 minutes, the phone finally turned on. He dialed his ex-wife's cell phone busy. Suddenly it rang. Alexander, he heard a stranger. What time should I pick you up? I'm around if you need me. The voice stretched the words and spoke with a strange accent. It sounded like, what time do you want to stop by? Drive where? The surgeon was surprised. What do you mean, where? We talked about this yesterday. It's me, Harry, the foreman. Kill me. I don't remember, Alexander thought. There was no alcohol at the dinner party. Sorry, apologized the surgeon. I forgot all about it. And slept, chuckled the foreman. Nothing, the case is young. In about 20 minutes it will be fine. But they won't let me over the fence, so you go out on your own. The clock showed 10. Alexander grabbed fresh underwear and rushed into the shower. After a few minutes he came to his senses, quickly wiped down his body and got dressed. Even the staff bathroom was decorated in a classic style. The shower cubicle stood on a snow-white pedestal. The ceiling was decorated with friezes. But the surgeon had no time to admire the beauty. He grabbed his cell phone, his diary, and ran outside. Outside the gate was already an old Volkswagen. The driver blinked at him. Did you really forget? The driver was a man in his 40s, obscenely thin. He looked good, but the look was spoiled by a nasty red mustache. Yes, nodded the surgeon. I guess the fresh air does that to me. Wow. The foreman slammed his hand on the steering wheel. We discussed everything yesterday. Well, let's go. It's just 2 kilometers away. A perfect road went all the way to the construction site. The surgeon had a cognitive dissonance. He had been to the backcountry, but he had never seen such smooth asphalt 500 kilometers from Washington. The future outpatient clinic was fenced and enclosed by a corrugated metal fence. There were neat cabins for the workers. Mr. M seemed to take any project seriously, even if it was a small clinic for the locals. This is where we're building, the foreman said with a wave of his hand. More trouble than profit. They decided to build the outpatient clinic on the site of the former club. The building really looked good. Thick walls, high ceilings. Additional offices and a ramp were added to it. The workers had already started to tidy up the premises, removed the garbage, installed electricity, plastered and pasted the walls. As soon as they entered the territory, the foreman started running and fussing, giving instructions. Put on a hard hat. What project? The man said, opening a folder with drawings. The surgeon looked at them, but didn't understand anything at first. Too many lines, thick and thin, straight and dotted. Too many numbers. You need good ventilation, Alexander said, pretending to read the project. Forced ventilation. And a sink in every office. That's the minimum. We'll do it. The man nodded and jabbed his finger at the papers. Here, look, it's in the project. I'll show you the conclusions on the walls. What's wrong? The foreman immediately showed him the pipes sticking out of the walls and began to explain where the water supply and the sewage system were. That the outpatient clinic will have its own boiler, even if it is expensive to maintain, but there will be no interruptions in supply. He talked and talked, and the surgeon began to feel dizzy from the flow of words. And we will insulate powerfully, he promised, stretching the sounds. To save money. We'll put in a recuperation system. Well, you walk around, take a look. You've got work to do here. By the way, how did Mr. lured you here? Alexander walked around the future outpatient clinic and was surprised by the order at the site. Everywhere clean and neat. At the construction sites where he had been before, there were cigarette butts, empty bottles and garbage everywhere, and the dust was as thick as a finger. There was nothing like that here, not even close, and the workers were moving not chaotically, but purposefully. Walking down the corridor, the surgeon looked at one of the construction workers. Tall and thin, he was concentrating in front of the wall, inspecting it for flaws. As if sensing his gaze, he turned around. He looked at the surgeon appraisingly, as if trying it on. He smirked. You should run away from here. Baron sniffed the man's nose. Run away forever. Archie, shouted the foreman, appearing out of nowhere, and accompanied his words with a selective mate. I told you not to talk to the doctor. Keep your mouth shut. I told you, didn't I? Have you finished plastering? Have you cleaned up all the garbage? There's no trace of the stretching and the weird accent. Strange man. So that's, the man mumbled. That's me. That means. That, spat the foreman. All, minus the bonus, he said. And when the worker began to fawn, immediately shunned him. All free. If you talk too much, you'll be out of a job. Alexander stood there, not understanding. As if seeing him for the first time, the foreman again smiled broadly. This is our order, he explained, and again began to stretch the words. You can't smoke, drink alcohol, or talk to the customer on the construction site. Not on any pretext. And that helps? Asked the surgeon. What? And how? Smiled foreman. His accent was coming back to him, along with his manners. It helps a lot. What deprived of a bonus once will remember, and will pass it on to the others. The surgeon dialed his ex-wife again and again, but the phone was always busy. In the evening, Catherine called back from another number, and from what he heard, Alexander became uncomfortable. He wanted to drop everything and rushed to Washington. The surgeon went to the mansion on foot and was ready to swear that yesterday he also walked in the village, only at night. He had deliberately deviated from his route to find the witch's hut. But now the houses seemed unfamiliar. Of course, he was dreaming, and his wife's call was a coincidence. She was crying again, begging him to come. She said she was scared, that her father woke up in the morning and couldn't raise his hand to say his name. And then he lost consciousness and has been in a coma for 24 hours. At this point, the surgeon thought gloatingly that he had long ago suggested that he examine his blood vessels, and if necessary, to be treated. What did he say? Right, called him the puppy and laughed. Now Alexander was facing a difficult choice: to rush to his ex-wife or to show character. The father-in-law is still in the hands of professionals, and they hardly need additional advice. With his money, he hardly felt the need to look for specialists, unless, of course, he was conscious. Alexander was angry, recalling their conversation at the very beginning of his epic with the clinic. Then the surgeon had asked for money to start the project. No, his father-in-law had cut him off. I won't. I already gave you my daughter, and you do not give enough. Don't even ask, okay? And he didn't even apologize, didn't even try to sweeten the pill for the sake of decency. Unbearable man. But why? Alexander was surprised then. I'm a great specialist. I have a great idea. It will go off. All of Washington will be queuing up. Remember, Washington hates queues. If anything's gonna go off, it's gonna go off right in your face. You know why? My father-in-law asked me haughtily. Because you want to make the world a better place. You can't make money that way. Why don't you sell silicone breasts or lip plumping? Or, if you don't want money, just say so, the surgeon said. Don't you get it? My father-in-law laughed. It's not the money that you're sorry for. Well, and money too, a little bit. Now gloating overflowed the surgeon's soul. If he hadn't run away from Washington so quickly, he could now operate on his father-in-law. Under the right circumstances. After all, it was his profile. He could do it cleanly, well, neatly. Give him treatment, and he could have a normal life again. Not right away, but in 6 months to a year. And learn to walk and talk again. Good day. He was brought out of his oblivion by the voice of the guard. The surgeon returned to the mansion. Already back? Yes, muttered Alexander. How are you? Excuse me. Yesterday they had met, but he didn't remember the name. What had happened to him? A real fog, amnesia. But the guard took this memory lapse with understanding. My passport says Stephen, he said. But if someone calls me something else, I don't take offense. Like, permission to speak, or may I ask a question? Or even, hey, you, young man, Alexander said with a smile. Well, as they say, thank you on a kind word. Though I'm not that young. The guard looked to be about 40 years old, no less. Despite the warm weather, he wore a shirt and jacket. The dress code of the guards must have been the same in different countries and cities. I'd like to see my benefactor, the surgeon asked. To the chief, Stephen asked. Sure. Do you know where his office is? Emmanuel Turk occupied the second floor. There were also many frills and luxuries here. For example, plaster busts of monarchs stood inside the niches. Alexander recognized Stephen, Catherine. A few niches were empty. Mr. M was optimistic about the future. Appointment? The guard outside the office asked. He wasn't as friendly as Stephen. I don't think I'll be denied an audience. The guard pressed the video call button and muttered surgeon. There was silence for a few seconds. Then a beep sounded. The door opened and Alexander stepped inside. Inside there were absolutely white walls and ceiling, light-colored furniture. Instead of windows, Emmanuel's office had aquariums. There were fish swimming inside, but if you looked closely, the street was also visible. Mesmerized by the sight, Alexander did not even immediately notice that one of the walls was literally hung with monitors. They showed some graphs, texts, continuously updated. Do you like it? The millionaire was pleased with the impression the aquariums made. It was my idea. I call this office the White Absolute. The aquariums are also my idea. It's like you're at the bottom of the sea and there's an ocean outside. It's very distracting because I'm always working. Well, you see, he nodded towards the monitors. And there's fish. Beautiful and original, don't you think? Well, yes, nodded the surgeon and thought that the ancient truth is still true. If you don't praise yourself, no one will praise you. How are things progressing? Mr. M asked. Dare I hope that at the end of the summer our dispensary will open its doors? Yes, nodded the surgeon. I'll be monitoring the facility remotely. It's all on cameras. No, I want you to stand over the workers. The millionaire exclaimed and jumped up from his chair. You have to work there. You and your staff. All day long, maybe even nights. By the way, where did you spend last night? I didn't see you leave dinner. Did I say goodbye in a decent house? Where did you spend the night? Alexander asked automatically. I spent it here. By the way, there is one more thing. You could say it's personal. What happened? My ex-wife called. She says her father-in-law is dying. He seems to be having a massive stroke, which is my specialty. I'm sure he's being treated by the best doctors in Washington. Emmanuel replied lazily. And your involvement would be redundant. Besides, I need you here. I'll drive there and back, Alexander asked. It will take a couple of days, no more. At least I'll get to see my daughter. Mr. M stood up and went to the window. He gazed into the aquarium, watching the fish. One, colorful and bright, drew all his attention. But down below, in the mud, the catfish were swarming, always getting the dirty work. When the silence lengthened, and the surgeon wanted to cough to remind of his presence, the millionaire mentally surfaced from his aquarium. All right, I'll let you go, he said, but on one condition. When he named it, the surgeon's eyebrows went up. Tell me honestly, when was the last time you had your car serviced? Mr. M asked as he and the two guards walked into the garage. The rumble of the engine almost made me deaf. It was a diesel, the surgeon shrugged. They all make that noise. As they say, if a diesel engine runs quietly, it doesn't work. Nonsense and nonsense, the millionaire didn't appreciate the joke. Take a normal car. Take this Japanese electric car, for example. It's 500 kilometers one way, Alexander objected. I won't have enough range. Reasonably, nodded the millionaire. Then this beauty, he nodded at the black BMW. A very capacious engine, although the volume is small. Maybe I'd rather drive mine, stretched out the surgeon. Mercedes is brand worship, Mr. M said knowingly. You don't look at the nameplate when you choose a car. If you're taking my precious, I want to make sure it's safe. It's just that the cars themselves are better, Alexander said. There's the pinnacle of human evolution, and then there's technical thought. so I drive a Mercedes. Maybe you don't need to drive it. Turk smiled. Maybe you just love it. Yes, I do, agreed the surgeon. He looked at his passion from a different angle, and, to tell the truth, very much so. In his heart, he hoped Mr. Am would forbid him to go to Washington. After all, he was his employer now, and now, like weekdays. The surgeon didn't even know if he wanted to see his daughter or not. He was confused. Sophia is my pain and sorrow, the millionaire suddenly spoke. I can't watch this flower wither. I worry about her, but I can't find a way to help her. She has such a painful beauty. How can I not love her? It's the kind of love that words can't convey. Anyone who marries her will be golden, said Mr. M, but it must be a worthy man. A very worthy man. What do you mean? Alexander asked. Gilding. A dowry, the millionaire explained. Not the biggest, of course, but I can give you 100 million. Of course, if I see and feel that love is strong, or at least the calculation is correct. Do you have a worthy candidate in mind? He had the feeling that Emmanuel was bored in his village and therefore looking for entertainment. And right now he's playing some kind of game with him, the capital surgeon, paired with a village witch who couldn't be changed by years in Washington, and not just Washington. Do I still have to take Sophia with me? The surgeon asked. Deep down, he hoped Mr. M would insist. It's out of the question. He cut him off. Take her and the BMW. I'll give you 2 days, and then come back and get on with your work. It's very important to me that the outpatient clinic is completed on time. We'll call the TV. Do you want to? We'll get some officials, so they can walk around, smack, and see how to work. Where is she? Where's Sophia? Don't worry, she'll come, smiled the millionaire. Have you heard what they call her here? Witch, huh? That's the cutest nickname I've ever heard. Don't look at me like I'm crazy. She called me this morning and asked me to take her to Washington. And here you are with your goddamn father-in-law. I guess there's no such thing as coincidence in this life. What do you think? The surgeon felt someone's eyes on him and turned around. Sophia was standing in the doorway. She was dressed unusually, if not provocatively. A playful look, as if they'd really spent the evening last night in each other's arms. From Archie's window, the lights of the manor house were visible. 5 years ago, when the renaissance of someone else's family nest had begun, their village had begun to resemble a passing yard. Dozens of trucks snaked back and forth every day. But there was work. Archie also found himself at the construction site, plastering and puttying walls, listening to the mockery of the foreman, drinking vodka and cursing the bourgeoisie. And when he saw Sophia again, it was as if his heart was suspended on a string. He could not sleep or eat, only thinking about her all the time. Of course, she had changed a lot, molded herself. Tall, black-haired, with big cheekbones and beautiful breasts. She really did look like a witch now, with a demonic fire in her eyes and a devilish energy radiating from her. Archie, she said without preamble, I see a dark stain on you. You should come to my place. We'll do a ritual. After drinking an entire glass of vodka, he came to her hut that night. Sophia met him in a strange, translucent garment. She recited some incantations, splashed muddy water on hot stones, and did other things. He wanted to cross himself, but she grabbed his arm tightly. From that day he lost his peace and thought only of Sophia. And when the rumor spread through the village that the banker would make her fiancé rich, "What an impenetrable fool you are," the girl said when she saw him a few days later. "Did you think you could get me?" From then on, the taunts became regular. The witch, having drunk his soul, having taken his peace, showed her true face. He comes to her with flowers, she laughs. He bought her chocolate, she laughs. Sometimes she condescends to talk to him, but no more. During one of these conversations, Archie cried, smearing tears down his cheeks. "Sophia," he said, "let's live together, huh? Come on, I'll fix up your house, make it a picture. Do you want to move into mine? I'll build you a room like in Washington. I'll work 24 hours a day. I'll work at a sawmill at night, as long as you don't need anything." But she laughed. She liked to see the village man suffer. With a beauty like her, he would never spend the night no matter how much you dream. And once he tasted the forbidden fruit, he became her toy forever. "Why are you silent, Sophia?" he asked. "Tell me yes, I pray to Christ God." She stopped laughing and even grinned. The next day she gave him a note and called him to her, as if to meet her father, that is, the chief baron, to get acquainted. And when Archie went to the fence, found the wicket, and knocked inside, some foreheads jumped out. They beat him up like that for a week. He couldn't sleep on his left side, breathing once in a while. Almost got away alive. However, he had some news about Sophia's life. First of all, she herself regularly visited the house of her parents on the edge of the village, which fueled rumors about her witchy essence. Secondly, a cook and a castellan from their village worked at the manor. They told me all sorts of things about Sophia, and usually the baron forbade them to talk about what was going on behind the beautiful fence, but here it was as if he didn't notice. Archie thought she had someone else forever, and he couldn't forgive her. Yesterday he'd seen him at the construction site. Thin, tall, lustrous. How could he, a simple man whose hands are more delicate than the handle of an axe, did not know anything, with such a pull? Tears ran down his cheeks from jealousy and heartache. He went outside before the wind, because there was no toilet in the house, and right by the door he noticed a white envelope. Archie crossed himself. Only an hour ago, when he come back from the store, it hadn't been there. Or had he imagined it? He took it in his hands. The paper was good, soft. He held it to his nose, smelling it so close, yet so inaccessible. I opened it with trembling hands, careful not to tear it. He held it up to his eyes so he could see the lines, and tears flowed from his eyes, but not of pain, but of joy. "Do you want me to drive?" Sophia asked. For several hours that they drove first on the country road and then on the highway, she did not sleep a wink. Only once did they stop for gas and coffee. "No," Alexander smiled. "The car is fire. Your father was right. He's not my father." Sophia snapped at him, and the smile disappeared from her face. They drove on in silence. The surgeon parked the black BMW near his father-in-law's cottage. And what had he found in this tasteless house before? After Emmanuel's mansion, the building looked both sad and shabby. But the millionaire's car was really good. 500 kilometers flew by in one breath. His neck or back didn't even get stiff. He got out and took out his cell phone to call his ex-wife, but she appeared beside him. "You settled in quickly," Catherine said, looking at the pretty witch, that, as if wanting to bring the jealousy of the ex to the maximum, smiled wickedly, and at this moment was charming. "Catherine, come on," Alexander asked. "This is the daughter of my boss, or rather, not a daughter. In general, consider that this is my assistant." "I see," Catherine said, insulted. "In everything you help you, this daughter of the boss." The smile did not leave Sophia's face. She seemed to revel in the jealousy of her rival. The surgeon felt like a complete idiot and did not know how to calm the woman. How did he used to deal with her? She started right up, didn't she? "You'd think no one helps you," said the witch and winked. Kate's face immediately turned crimson. "Get out," she whispered. "Get out, both of you." "Catherine, what kindergarten?" said the surgeon. "I drove 500 kilometers. What about my father? Where is he lying? Let's go, I'll talk, I'll examine him." "No," she cut off. "Go away. It's too late. He never came to his senses. Do you understand?" "It's not a judgment," Alexander replied. "Tell us where he is and we'll go there. Come on." "Right, your witch, I love another," whispered Catherine. "What?" asked the surgeon, not believing his ears. "Another?" Mark shrugged his ex-wife. The real man is not you." Alexander felt dizzy, as if Catherine had slapped him. He physically felt his skin burning. Mark, his apprentice, his former companion. What did she see in him? 30 years old, yesterday's student. How long have they been together? I wonder, Alexander thought. "Okay, we're leaving," said the surgeon, surprisingly calm. "And what?" asked the ex-wife. "You won't say anything else? Not even hit? Can I see my daughter?" "There is no her," giggled Catherine. "No, your new girlfriend will give you another one. Or a son. Or the old one will take away," smiled Sophia, took Alexander by the hand and took him to the car. She put him on the passenger seat and started the engine and sharply pressed the gas. Now it was clear to him. It's over. How could he live so many years with the illusion of love for this woman? Only now he realized how unpleasant Catherine was to him. Worse, indifferent, but only his daughter. How to see her? "I drive normally," Sophia said, pulling out onto a busy road. "You look, of course. Come on, tell me which nightclub to go to. We'll cheer you up." "I don't want to go to a club," Alexander replied. "Do you know Washington's well?" Well, the girl shrugged her shoulders, but nobody cancelled Google and Magic Alice. "What, witches also use the internet?" asked the surgeon. "Yeah," Sophia replied. "I have an idea. There's an attic." "An attic?" "Well, yes," said the girl. "It's called a cafe. You can sit there and smoke hookah." "Hookah is bad for you," said the surgeon. "It kills neurons in the brain. Let's go." His heart was racing. After his ex-wife's revelations, he felt heavy. They collapsed on soft cushions and took turns inhaling smoke mixed with the aromas of flowers and fruits, and with each puff Alexander more and more accepted his situation. "My daughter will grow up," he thought, "and will definitely understand me. Or maybe I'll take her away sooner." He didn't even notice how the witch was right next to him and snuck under his shoulder. The surgeon thought the locals were slandering her. What kind of witch is she? She's a charming girl, close at hand at such an important moment. "Do you know what I dreamed last night?" Alexander asked with a smile and suddenly blushed. "I know. Dreams are the journey of souls. We could well be together while our mortal bodies were lying on their beds. Will you kiss me?" she asked innocently. And they merged in one great passion and almost unwrapped the hookah on themselves, which provoked the wrath of the receptionist. In the morning, as they were leaving the hotel, Sophia paid at the counter herself, and right from there she sent him a kiss. They traveled the road to Raznovidno in silence. The witch was smiling, and Alexander was immersed in his own thoughts. The revived manor had not gone anywhere. The gates moved. The guards jokingly saluted. "That was fast," Stephen said. "Give me the keys, I'll park it myself. The chief is waiting in his office." The surgeon turned around to say goodbye to the witch, but she was already gone. She literally vanished into thin air. He walked into the house, moving from the hot street to the cool of the ruins. It was as if he had been transported to another time and age. His benefactor was waiting for him in the living room, sipping green tea from a mug. How was the trip? Emmanuel's voice was filled with ill-concealed curiosity. It was fine. Decided to stay the night? Ha, it's a young thing. Yes, Alexander tried to make his voice sound indifferent. You know, it was too late to go back. After all, 500 kilometers. I understand, agreed the millionaire. It's good that we returned today. The project is not waiting. But you shouldn't be in a hurry either, because you're taking the gold, my gold. Alexander nodded and left. Yes, the villainous fate continued to put its experiments on him. The surgeon remembered the morning in the hotel, how Sophia covered herself with a silk sheet with her head. Suddenly she pulled it off, sat on the bed young, beautiful, with a perfect figure, completely naked. "Let's go," she said or ordered, pulling the blanket up to her shoulders. "Or maybe you want to." "No," he objected. Let's go, because your father, he's not my father, the witch shouted in a low voice, covering her mouth with her hand in shame. The blanket slipped off again, revealing her breasts. Are you sure you don't want to? I want to take a shower, Alexander smiled, though he was actually scared. The night with Sophia seemed like a dream to him. He could no longer understand what was real and what was a dream. He returned back to the living room, and the millionaire stared at him in bewilderment. And Alexander wanted to come up and touch his benefactor to make sure that he was real. Did you forget something? Mr. M asked. No. Alexander tried to think of an excuse so that his return wouldn't seem so strange. An old general was talking to me the other day. Asked you to look around. The millionaire asked. Go at once. After all, the outpatient clinic will soon be put into operation. So why not begin to get acquainted with the patients? There was nowhere to go. The benefactor himself said to visit the general and examine him. In the manor found a good box of medical instruments. The surgeon took it rather for solidity. After all, he was not going to diagnose the first patient in this wilderness. The general's house was far away near the forest, and a guard drove him there. Alexander went to the entrance and pressed the bell. A friendly woman with sad eyes let him inside. The general was already waiting inside, and he didn't look well. A red face, on which there was a mesh of burst vessels, clearly indicated ill health. The retired military man was smiling. Would you like a drink? The old general asked as they went into the living room. No, Alexander replied. It's bad for your health. What's troubling you? Oh, Evan exhaled. I'm worried about the fate of my homeland. I am afraid that it has been taken over by either fools or blind men. And as for my health, there is a delicate problem. I don't know how to put it. Have you taken tests? The surgeon asked. Yes, the general nodded at a stack of documents. Just 2 days ago, I had to shake for 2 hours on the way to the clinic. Shaking. Alexander was surprised. The road is beautiful. The road is, but my fear of medicine has not been cancelled, the general explained. Here are the results. He pointed to a puffy folder of test results and conclusions. The surgeon began to leisurely study them, reading. Wow, how is he still alive? The papers spoke eloquently that the old general needed qualified help. Why didn't the doctor prescribe treatment for you? I don't trust him, the general replied. Because of his political views. What if he wants to poison me? And you were recommended to me as a neutral person. As a man who will definitely not heal anyone. Alexander sighed. He liked this village with its strange inhabitants less and less. Listen, said the surgeon. Rarely would a doctor pay attention to the political views of a patient when prescribing treatment. That's exactly what's rare. Evan exclaimed. That's exactly the kind of doctor who works at the clinic to which we belong. Sorry, the fear medicine is wearing off. I need to repeat it. The general took a decanter with fogged walls and poured cognac into a shot glass. He armed himself with a fork to cut a slice of lemon. No, Alexander resolutely covered the shot glass with the palm of his hand. I can see that you have stones, kidney stones. You see this picture right here. They injected you with a special liquid to make it. Doesn't cognac soften them? The general was surprised. He tried to snatch the shot glass, but he couldn't compete with the doctor. On the contrary, said the surgeon. This is one of the reasons for their formation. Undressed to the waist, let's examine you. Studying the patient and medical documents, Alexander thought that a man digs his own grave. For example, this retired general, Evan, he's not even 60 years old, and his body is like an old man's. His joints don't bend, his skin's all blistered, he can barely move. We should put him on a diet, cut out alcohol. Maybe we could get him back on his feet. Well, summarized Alexander, there are 2 options, surgical and conservative treatment. Speak to me like an idiot, Evan asked, if you would be so kind. Okay. The doctor gave in. Or you stop eating meat in pots and drinking cognac in buckets, and then you can choose a diet, prescribe medications. Absolutely not, the general exclaimed. I'm going crazy in this wilderness. I was dismissed so unfairly and so soon. The girl covered her mouth with her hand as if she was about to say something unnecessary. Our union is approved, but not in heaven, Sophia said. And you're starting to wiggle. That's not how decent men behave. You're a decent man, I can see that. Don't lie to me. She suddenly laughed in a low voice that a girl just can't have. I'll think about it, he said and smiled, but he had goosebumps running up and down his spine. Can I be alone for a while? There was something wrong about it, something unnatural and fake. Alexander rubbed the mark Mr. M had given him. The burn was almost healed, even though it had only been a few days. I'll leave, the surgeon said to himself and started packing. After all, he hadn't signed any papers. This whole village, Divergent, is just collective insanity. Insanity. And it's run by a crazy millionaire. Can't you see he's not going to succeed? What does he want to accomplish? Bring back the US of a century ago. It doesn't exist. And he's just a nouveau riche, not a hereditary nobleman. And there aren't even 50 souls in his village. The surgeon went to the shower. He wanted to wash up before the road. It was getting dark, so he didn't even turn on the light in the room. Okay, but we have to go today. Suddenly he felt someone's presence. Is she back? What a witch! Who's there? Loudly asked the surgeon, approaching the light switch. I'll turn on the light. Hello, Archie whispered, from Sofka. And at the same second Alexander felt a blow in the back of his neck and bent like a bowstring. He wanted to pull the knife out, to call for help or just scream, but he couldn't. He collapsed on his side, still convulsing. That's it, Archie whispered, satisfied, turning on the light. I'll watch you while you get here, because Sophia is mine, do you hear? The surgeon was breathing with great difficulty. As a specialist, he understood perfectly well that the village man had inflicted a severe wound on him, and how ineptly he had done it. He could have killed him at once, then he wouldn't have had to suffer, or missed, leaving a scratch. Of all the options, he chose the most unfortunate. Alexander could remain conscious for a long time and suffer from horror and pain. Suddenly, he heard Stephen run into the room in footsteps. Hands up, he shouted. Come on. The sounds of struggling reached the weakening Alexander, and then a strange sound, as if a piece of meat had been thrown to the ground, and a terrible sigh. Archie. Doctor, said the guard, dropping to a knee beside him. Alexander saw his frightened eyes. Doctor, can we turn around? Doctor, can you hear me? Hold on, I'll save you. He said no to her. He told her no. Sophia couldn't believe it. What had she done wrong? Was her natural magic not enough to make this snob of the capital fall in love with her? She'd liked him immediately, and her benefactor hadn't dared refuse. He called her here simply because she'd asked him to. Alexander was good. On all accounts, on all cards, their union promised to be long and happy. I can only applaud, Mr. M said. Anything you say, sweetheart. Well, you'll forgive me, won't you? But it all went wrong. Why was Alexander frightened? She could see the fear in his eyes, but fear is half the problem. What matters is indifference. No man she'd ever chosen for herself had ever been indifferent, and Emmanuel was the first. He just didn't realize it was she who drew him to her, not him. And she was not mistaken. The penitent millionaire became something of a springboard for her. But Alexander, how good and strong he was. He probably didn't realize it himself. The doctor was a boulder. In time, their union could have been a song of ice and fire, and then the whole world would shudder. But Alexander rejected her. Such things are not forgiven, no. Anyone but her. Sophia could forgive anything but indifference. At that moment, the girl realized that the capital surgeon could not belong to anyone but her. And if he doesn't want to, well, so much the worse for a man essentially young and handsome. but useless. In that moment, she passed judgment on him. Would she be sorry? Of course not. In such things as love, there can be no defeat. It's either a victory or a fighting draw. Alexander woke up. He could hardly open his eyes, and at first he thought he had gone blind. Everywhere was white, the walls, the ceiling, and even the rag with which he was covered. Above him were familiar mascarons, ancient goddesses, animals. That this was not a morgue, Alexander realized by the smell. It smelled sterile and clean, which can only be in a hospital. We woke up. 3 months of sleep is no joke. Everyone has already put a cross, but not me. They say you can't buy health and happiness. Ha! Yes, you can. The voice was familiar. The surgeon heard in it mixed feelings, relief and disappointment. It was as if Alexander was someone the voice both wanted to see and hoped never to know again. Completely immobilized, he couldn't answer anything. The sensation was unlike any previous experience. The doctors claimed you would not regain consciousness, but I disagreed. How could a man under my protection leave without my consent? No, it's impossible. Alexander was silent. He tried to push air through his recalcitrant mouth so that he could make meaningful sounds, but the result was only mooing. At least he was able to breathe unaided. I wonder what his body looks like now. If the millionaire wasn't lying about the 3 months, the muscles must have turned into strings. Maybe speech will be restored, Mr. M said, watching his exertions. That's it for now. By the way, blink if you can hear. Alexander obeyed. The realization of his own part came to him. Paralyzed, turned into the broken doll he'd examined during his internship. Did he ever think he'd be in the same position? I'm not leaving you, Mr. M said eagerly. You see, the outpatient clinic came in handy. You could say you built it for yourself, couldn't you? No, really. I've had a feeling for a long time that it should be built. I could send you to Washington or even Berlin. But no, I can't. I need to be sure you're all right. The surgeon never gave up trying to ask a question. He exhaled air with his mouth, trying desperately to lift his tongue to the sky. He could feel it a little. S, he whispered, and only a man of true passion could make sense of it. Sophia. Emmanuel interjected. Oh, she was so ashamed. She's the one who put him up to it. You know, though. No, I did not bring her to justice. What's that gonna fix? Now we keep each other's secrets and balance them out. And you look like a tank, like a Baroque vase. Mr. M was silent for a moment. I'm really sorry, but don't worry, Sophia will visit you. Read books, feed you. I'll make sure that for the rest of her or the rest of your life, rest, doctor, and don't worry about a thing. All your troubles are behind you.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.